Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining our virtual meetup. It's always a fun time to see you guys face to face. I cannot wait. Cannot wait until I see you guys live at night. I talk to many of you on a regular basis, but it's different from talking virtually over a webcam versus seeing you face to face and chat. Happy today that now I have to have a live partner today here from Microsoft, actually. You can now see the Microsoft commitment to Azure Stack HCI because Alan's here physically next to me, and he's going to share his thoughts, and he'll do his intro as well on who he is. He'll share about what the direction of this entire technology goes. It's not just a hardware, it's about services, it's about hybrid, and I think you guys are going to get a good glimpse of what's really happening in terms of all the investment Microsoft's making. I also asked Henry, who's our lead, runs our product, our management here at DataON, also really knows everything Azure, to kind of share some real life demos that he's been sharing with the customer as well. So without further ado, Alan, why don't you get started, introduce yourself, and kind of talk about what you want to share today.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen and get a presentation going on. Right. So hi, everyone. Thanks, Howard, for the invite. DataON is a very good partner of Microsoft. We talk all the time about various things that are going on within the industry and directions and that kind of stuff. And part of my job is I'm in charge of Azure Stack HCI sales motions across North America. So in Canada, US is me. And then anything outside of that, I either have a direct partner, or if it's a large corporate, then it's probably me and one of my counterparts. For example, in Europe, we would work together if it's a multinational. So today, Howard's asked me to come in. We're going to talk about a little bit about Azure Arc and what it is, where it's going, what it's doing for us. The real key of what Azure Arc is, it's a set of technologies that's bundled together to act as the glue between Azure services and other services that Azure can provide, and anything that is outside of Azure. And so when we talk about that, we're really talking about security and governance and data services like SQL and Postgres.
I wonder if you could let Maggie out. Mercy had to work today.
And then physical infrastructure and multi-cloud, right? And then our favorite, where we get some special sauce, is the Azure Stack HCI and also the Azure IoT. It's good to note that the Azure IoT now sort of runs within the Azure Stack HCI. So I suspect over time we're going to see a merging of those, because we're seeing less and less differentiation from the customer as to what their edge means, right? They're combining OT and IT into that same motion because it's all IT. So what is it? It's basically, once again, it's a set of technologies, but it really does two things. The first thing it does, it enables your infrastructure to be seen as resources within Azure. So whether it's individual servers, whether it's physical hardware, whether it's other cloud services from other vendors, whether it's edge components, we discover those and we present them into Azure, which means we can then apply policies and governance and control them, as well as we can distribute services to those same things. And so whether it's data services like SQL Managed Instance, which if you haven't looked at, you really should, and Azure Virtual Desktop and all of the AI and ML that you hear about, it's being able to take all of those Azure services and being able to present those onto any infrastructure wherever it may be. So one of the things that sometimes Azure in general, right, because it's a big topic, is a little fuzzy. So one of the things I like to do is just make it very clear for everyone what is public cloud, what is Azure Stack HCI, and where does it fit, and how does Arc and the control plane that we talk about work within this stuff. So if I was to define Azure Public Cloud, it is an Azure data center on the Microsoft backbone. That's the two key points, right? If it meets one of those criteria, it is managed by Microsoft. On that, we run the Azure software. On top of that, we have a virtualization engine, as well as a Kubernetes service, which runs our containers, data services, and apps. Across that, we run pretty much any application that you want to either code directly for containers or want to port to Azure. And now, more importantly, one of the other things that we're seeing a lot of is this guy here, which is the Azure Marketplace, and the ability to go in and deploy, for example, any of the big name software with one click into your environment on-prem in a best recipe environment that the software manufacturer has defined. All through a single control plane. So we have the Azure portal, and you can manage all of this. And so now when we look at on-prem, and once again, I've defined that as not on the Microsoft backbone, not in the Microsoft data center, we have Azure Stack HCI. And this is going to be a merging technology that it enables all of this stuff. So the first thing we do is we go get our DataON hardware, and we decide where we're going to put it. We then run the Azure Stack HCI software. On top of that, we run our virtualization engine. We run our Kubernetes service. And once again, we have all our data services and VMs we can run. One of the things I like to point out, because people ask this every day, is that how does this compare to X? The one thing I really want to highlight is this is the only technology out there today that actually has these as equal tenants.
Yeah, we're gonna start using C2 till I can figure out what's happening.
So normally you got a virtualization engine and you nest in Kubernetes, or I have a Kubernetes engine and I nest in virtualization. So I have to prioritize which one am I going to run. For enterprises, that's not a thing that they want to do. They need them equal because they're migrating and moving back and forth. The real key here is that we've got these running in, autonomous cars and cruise ships and cell phone towers and restaurants and data centers, as well as if you check out Azure Orbital, we've got it running on, space stations and satellites and all that kind of stuff as well. So once again, when I define on-prem, I literally mean not in the Microsoft data center on the Microsoft backbone. That is where we see this playing. So from a greenfield opportunity standpoint, it is enormous. This is going everywhere. And Azure Arc ties these together. So it ties in the left and the right. So basically I can pull telemetry up and I can push services down. That's what Arc does for us. When we talk about delivery of those services, these are the points that you would connect back to. And so this is because we have it's one of the largest private networks in the world. We certainly have the most regions and the most data centers of the providers, which means that you're getting local or relatively local, low latency access to any of the services that we are pushing. And so that enables things like if you're doing distributed availability groups, things like that, it's going to be very fast if I'm not having to go large distances to do those things. This is an eye chart. I don't expect anyone to read it. The real thing I want you to get out of this is that, we're doing a lot of work today. We're going to continue to do a lot of work on this, on Arc specifically, and it's really around two categories. The first one is the infrastructure, whereby we are going to essentially enable any way and anything out there that you want to have to pull that into as a resource in Azure, and conversely is push services from Azure to any of that infrastructure, whether it's serverless apps, functions, like I said, SQL managed instance. This is, one of the big topics that people talk about every single day, as well as the various machine learning technologies that you talk about. Once again, another eye chart. I'm not supposed to sort of really dig into it that much. The thing to note is that we have a constant flow of general availability with preview going into the next half to become generally available, and so on and so forth. This roadmap goes out years as it stands today. Right now, I'm just showing you some of the snapshot on what's happening. The big one is anytime you see ARM, anytime you see this referenced in anything, basically that tells you more things that can be run, right? Because it just means we've got more connections. Once again, going into this is the Azure Stack HCI and the Kubernetes roadmap. A couple of important ones on here. That autoscale is another big one. So autoscale comes in two flavors. One is I can produce pods, right? So I can do a horizontal scale, so I can keep producing pods as limits are hit within applications. And I can also scale vertically with autoscale. So I can go in and dynamically add cores to various services that need additional, sort of horsepower to run, whether it's RAM or whether it's CPUs and those kind of things. We're also going to provide a lot of migration services that are in test right now, as well as the WAC in Azure portal, which also has a tie-in to the hardware piece. And so you can manage all of your on-prem hardware through once again, that one portal. And then over here, we've got some other stuff that's coming out general availability in a couple of months. This one here is probably the big one, AVD on HCI. And then once again, we've got data services, machine learning, application services. There's once again, a very long roadmap with a very long runway. The big thing that people talk about every day is these SQL upgrades and getting evergreen SQL and getting out of SQL migrations. So I just have SQL on. That combined with distributed availability groups, which we're going to talk about in another meetup that's going to come up, and why that's important for things like single node that's been announced. But it's really a matter of that all of the data services, at some point, the intention is to make them available on-prem in some fashion. So we kind of covered this a little bit, but it's really sort of details exactly where you kind of fit in and where Microsoft fits in and who's doing what. So the first one over this side is the Azure public cloud, right? This could be sovereign cloud, multi-cloud, depending on where it is. But once again, that right here, this here is in the Microsoft backbone in a Microsoft data center. This one here, when we talk about regional edge, this is where we start seeing telcos get involved. So you've got your AT&Ts and your T-Mobiles and that kind of stuff, and Equinix type data centers that host our stuff on our backbone in their data center. So we manage the hardware, but we don't manage essentially the room it's in. And so that's where this comes in. Now we start talking about the customer managed stuff. This is your data centers, your factory floors, your retail locations, your restaurants, those kind of things. That's where it's all customer managed. And then finally, to the very edge, which is where your IoTs, your devices are, your sensors, your gateways, your cameras, and we're pulling that in. And so typically what happens is you will see, this stuff will be pulled back into customer on-prem stuff to do AI or ML or make some kind of determination or decision. And then it's either flows back to here or here for backup, disaster recovery, or global sort of analytics. So for example, SQL managed instance, if you run SQL link, you can actually take all of your databases that run across all of your different locations, send them up to a central read-only copy, and then have Power BI give you all your analytics for your company centrally. Once again, this is just a flyover view of just a different way of presenting the same thing. Once again, Arc is really having that central control plane, managing and deploying modern apps through containerized services onto your on-prem hardware, and once again, defining the on-prem hardware as not Microsoft. Top use cases and where we're seeing this. So this is data center modernization, and these SQL workloads and Windows workloads is the number one thing that we're seeing today. It happens every single day. That's where the topic starts, quite often with the containerization and the modernization of my apps in enterprise, and how do I automate my VMs if I'm in sort of that, it will say medium commercial down to SMB. That's all about automation, and how do I get into an environment whereby I don't have to have a million IT people worrying about my stuff. AVD is another huge one that we're seeing a lot of use for. So AVD, this is the only way of running Windows 10 or Windows 11 multi-session. And so that's the only way you can get that sort of hyper density and ultra low cost of doing VDI at scale. And I don't know if anyone on here was on the retail event that was conducted earlier this month, but we're seeing a lot of retail and fleet management use cases, as well as the PMEX stuff that's coming out of the carriers, as well as the introduction of all the edge stuff and the Percept stuff over here, which Howard's working on with us to get those services up and running for DataON.
Let me pause a second. Couple things. First of all, everybody here are pretty much, I spoke to a customer that's interested in the Microsoft technology, and I want to make sure you guys take this opportunity to ask any question you like to Alan. Feel free to stump in, because I feel like he does know a lot of direction technology, and I also want to make sure encourage you. So whoever asks questions, I will give a $20 Amazon card or Starbucks card to, and right away when you engage and ask questions. Why this session is very interesting is for the last 10 years, or last 6 years, where we've been talking about infrastructure, we always talk about the hardware piece of it. When I talk to and the talk to Bill, it's all about, hey, you should refresh the infrastructure. Look at replacing your SAN. Microsoft has a great technology that you could run software defined. That has been a conversation, but that conversation has changed. It has changed because Microsoft is adding services, hybrid service technology that really enable you to run your application more seamless. A lot of applications, I never had a conversation with you. For example, I never had a conversation with Bill, hey, do you run ABD? And Bill and his school actually has RDS Farm, and they've been using ABD across the board. But now, because Microsoft are adding services or enabling services that makes the life easier and using Azure Stack on-premise as an infrastructure, that conversation really had broadened with all our customers, right? And the ability for you to see all that services on a single control plane called Arc is really a game changer because Microsoft's not perfect, but they continue to show that this concept of hybrid cloud is real. The concept, the fact that all the pain point of our SQL customer have to manage SQL VMs, and you could do everything with managed SQL. The ability that you could move your VDI from cloud to on-premise based on what workload works for you. All this cannot be realized unless you have an infrastructure that's truly hybrid and connected to Azure, like Azure Stack HCI. So the conversation has really taken a different direction for me and my customer recently, because all these are realities and stuff that you guys think about in addition to infrastructure. So that's why I felt this discussion was very meaningful as Microsoft continued to talk about the different services and vertical they're enabling, because it opens the opportunity for you guys, whether or not you do it yourself for your customer, your end users, or MSPs. So I just want to add that really quick to make sure as a perspective that this is how I see why Arc is something that will really change how we look at the entire hybrid cloud.
Yeah, so to add to that, one of the sort of the key things to realize is that if you rewind the clock sort of when public cloud came available, say 10 years ago for the sake of conversation, there was a real problem with shadow IT organizations being created because the finance department wanted a VM and the IT department couldn't deploy it in time, as an example. And so the focus really has been is take all of the way that you interact with the public cloud, speed of deployment, the way it's built, only consumption use, the services available, all of those things, and say, how do we get the on-prem IT people to have that function so it prevents, or it doesn't make any sense for have the other departments or lines of business go outside of the IT department. So part of it is enabling IT to take back that control, because it's like, well, yeah, we can deploy that just as fast. I can go click a button just like you can. And so that was the underlying sort of initiative to sort of start all this stuff and say, hey, there's a reason people like some of the stuff in the public cloud, and there's some reasons they don't like it. And the reasons they don't like it, for example, one of them is the initial, like I said, go back a few years, the initial concern was cost, right? Well, that's transformed to my now concern is governance and security, right? How do I manage this stuff that's everywhere? Because it's not in my data center. I can't just lock the door and pretend we're, it's all good anymore. And so, customers are now saying, well, the way we handle the cost is we put it on-prem, because then we've pre-bought essentially, or we've prepaid for RAM and CPU and all the things that are the variables, and we're just paying for the fixed cost of the software. That's one. But I can now take all my security and my governance and all the other policies and then apply it across everything, both public and private, wherever that stuff is. And so it's really a sort of best of both worlds that we're trying to achieve with Arc and Azure Stack HCI and all the other technologies that we kind of brought up today. Thank you. So this is coming to the tail end of my bit. I just want to focus in a little bit on this virtual desktop thing, specifically with Azure Virtual Desktop. It is, like I said, I can't stress enough about how many times this comes across my desk in a given day. It's really about end user performance and security. It's simple to manage. And once again, is that you can do hybrid mobility in DR because you can do things like fail back to the public cloud and things like that. One of the questions that comes up is that, well, are we going to enable, because you've probably seen various announcements like Windows 365, can I just use that? And the answer, simply put, is no, because Windows 365 is not configurable, right? So I can't have it in your environment doing what you want in your domains and all those kind of things. Whereas the Azure Virtual Desktop is designed to be configurable and integrate into whatever your environment you're using, running your apps on your premises, with your security features, all that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of the key here. And the real thing is, once again, it's that single control plane with the end user experience of Windows 10 and Windows 11, which is what everyone's used to, right? They're not necessarily used to the server versions of these, which is where we try and do. And also the server version, interestingly enough, is not an optimized end user desktop, right? This platform is optimized for the end user, and it's designed for front load application use and things like that. And lastly, obviously, you got with RDP short path, it's the lowest latency way of getting it both either on-prem or in the cloud. We'll just find the shortest path. And so the one thing that, when you compare Azure Stack HCI, for example, to Windows, and you've probably had this conversation on these other meetups, is Azure Stack HCI is designed to be the bare metal OS. Windows 2022 Plus is designed to be a guest OS, right? And much like, you wouldn't run Windows Server on your desktop, the same thing is the AVD version of Windows 10 and Windows 11 is designed to be that end client desktop that you run. And so it's really a right size for everything. So everything is optimized, which gets us the most efficient use of hardware, fastest performance, best security, those kind of things. And that's all I had other than the open discussion and the demos that Henry's going to show us.
Yeah, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. I'm surprised Andy hasn't jumped down and say, are you sure about AVD? But we'll talk about that a little bit later. I asked Henry to join because I want Henry to show you what could be done today in the demo. He'll show you what's running his lab, right? Because a lot of stuff we talked about, Arc Manage, it could be fluffy, it could be real, but I wanted Henry to kind of show all the people here what can be done today as a reference, to ground ourselves in more rapid day. Go ahead, Henry.
Yeah, and I guess maybe we should start with any questions for Alan first, maybe, just so that.
Howard, there's 2 questions in the chat.
I can't see, that's why. I'm sorry. Maybe you could call them out.
Oh, I can
just call the person out. I love you.
Where can we get more information? Arc enabled SCVMM.
Who asked the question?
Brandon. So I got a question from Brandon.
Hey, Brandon, what's your question?
The question was, can we get more information on Arc enabled SCVMM?
Okay.
Yeah, I saw that was in the preview, but when I did a quick Google search on it, I saw information on vSphere, Arc enabled vSphere, but I cannot quickly find any of the features that'll be available for SCVMM integration.
So if you want to, I don't know if you saw my email up there, but if you want to email me that, I can find out what I can talk about publicly. And I can get that back to you.
Right, yeah, I don't see the email. Is it in the chat or?
No, let me send it to you.
We'll put it in the chat.
I'll put it in the chat.
So Brandon knows this well. He has 2, oh my God, I don't know how many clusters he has, but he has a stretch cluster too, as well. So I think a lot of stuff he does is try to optimize the process too. So Brandon, Alan will give you his email, and maybe he'll dig out the information for you. Just like that,
perfect.
Brandon, our Amazon card for you for asking a simple question.
Oh, nice.
All right, so Brandon, you should see that. I don't know if you see that. I just put it in the chat.
I do. I have it.
Okay.
Who's the next person asking question?
So we have Brett.
Brett
has a question.
Go ahead.
We brought in HCI clusters into VM 2022. Why use Arc if we could just use HCI for certain VMs? Good. So the question is, this may be a clarification thing, are you talking about on-prem management versus cloud management?
Correct.
Yeah, we're still kind of managing these like a legacy, like we do all of our other clusters. And so our crew is used to using VMM. Is there any advantage I should be having them use the Azure portal and enable Arc for managing these clusters?
So the one thing that's true to say is that, and I thought I had the slide, but I maybe took it out. There's a I didn't include this. So there's a slide there where I talk about Arc, right? So Arc basically, when you look at the public way of getting into Azure and all of the various services, you can go through PowerShell, I can go through the web, I can go through whatever, right? And then I can get to my Azure services through that way, right? And then through Arc, I can then get to on-prem. And when you're talking about out-of-band services like the VMM and all the other ways of doing it, any on-prem versions of this, you're basically going the back way, right? So there's, from our perspective, you're just managing it however you want to manage it, right? Where the benefit comes in is when you start saying, I want to do additional things over and above just manage, right? I want to pull telemetry and say, hey, do I have a security issue going on, right? Am I running Defender for Cloud across the stuff or Defender for Servers? And do I have a security issue? In which case, that's where Arc comes in. If you're just talking about straight day-to-day management, it's really about size and scale. If I'm doing this on one-prem, it's typically easier with local tools. If I'm doing it across large swaths of real estate with tens or hundreds or thousands of clusters, then sometimes the organization of Azure makes it easier because I can catalog it and tag it and do all those other kind of things within Azure. And then you can apply the automation on top of that can come from Azure as well. So the additional services is where the real difference is. If you're just talking about sort of straight up management of that infrastructure, that's almost a personal preference.
And Brad, yeah, 7 sites, 2 nodes each. If you could streamline that management, it will make your life easier.
Yeah, and I was looking at it from just monitoring, using Azure Monitor for these things, and instead of trying to use OpsMan, the old way, it's like, well, why go backwards, go forward a little bit. Let the other guys use VMM if they want to, but I can manage it with Arc myself, maybe going forward.
And so the other good thing would be if they made a change, that would obviously be reflected in what you would see, right? So one of the things that when you've got Azure Monitor and these other services, one of the services that I get pinged on most is Azure Automate, right? And so what that enables you to do from sort of cloud down or public cloud down through Arc is apply policies to these clusters. And so when someone who is using an out-of-band management does something they shouldn't do, it will either prevent them or put it back depending on what they did. And so you can prevent things like configuration drift and that kind of stuff. So that's one of the ways of putting up guardrails that kind of protect your environment from, use the kind word of human error, but so there are additional things coming, and I think what you'll find is that there is going to be a split at some point. Right now, this is just me reading the tea leaves, so this is not a statement from Microsoft. You're going to find that like all the other software packages out there, whether it was Office or whether it was Windows or whether it was whatever, it started out where features came first onto the physical on-prem version, and then it was available in the cloud. And then they hit a feature parity version whereby they were released at the same time. And now you're seeing things being released, for example, by Office 365 before it is released on the on-prem version. So I would suggest to you what you're probably going to see is a shift towards features and functions available on the cloud management side that will either show up late on the VMM side, or they won't show up at all, depending on what it is. So I would suggest to you that over time, it would be probably worth the exercise of sort of retraining the staff, but that retraining isn't wasted because then they will understand how to do all the other stuff, that's sort of coming down the pipe, all the new stuff and the new features that are going to be available. But like I said, we're not sort of dictating to anyone which way they want to manage it. They manage it how they want to manage it. Because the other thing that is a topic of conversation is that what happens in disconnected states. I can't use cloud management, right? So that's a topic for another day, but that's where those sort of relevant, sort of conversations come in about how do we manage it, what are we using to manage it, that kind of stuff. Nate, sorry, does that answer the question? Are we good?
Yeah, no, that was awesome. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
All right, you want Starbucks or you want Amazon card, Brad?
What's that?
You want $20 Starbucks card or Amazon card?
Amazon, man. Thanks,
right.
dude.
Make sure you share out with John, okay? He gets half of it.
Yeah, John's gone. He doesn't get anything from me anymore.
Okay. Any other questions?
That looks like it's any questions out there. Bill had to jump.
Okay.
And then there was a response from Ernie to Brett.
Okay, cool.
So I think we're good for now.
Right, Harry, see if you can show that some of these are real, not vaporware.
Yeah, so let's see. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the Azure Arc side of the Azure portal. And as Alan alluded to, there's a lot of stuff here. And it's going to keep growing. I'm sure they're going to have to figure out how to manage all this stuff as it keeps growing. But the two big buckets, I guess you can consider that, is they see this as infrastructure and services. So infrastructure side of it, basically you have things like this is the traditional servers. This basically goes back to the Ignite 2019 days when they announced it, and that I have the T-shirt for that. Basically the servers is the first one, and then you got the Kubernetes cluster, and I'll show you a little bit about that. The SQL Server then adds additional features on top of the servers, in that you can leverage the SQL assessments to basically assess your existing SQL environment to see, what could be improved and all that kind of stuff. And then Azure Arc Virtual Machines. So this is the one that is going to be related to AVD, and I'll show you that one first. So going down the line here. So let me just to say. So this section basically, oh, wrong color. Basically, it's all the stuff that is related to management. Not that interesting, but you kind of have to do it just to get some of the stuff to work. As you get into the infrastructure side, so this is what we're talking about, infrastructure. So you got the virtual machines, the Azure Stack HCI, Kubernetes cluster servers, SQL servers, and then now they have a preview for VMware vCenter as well. So going down to the first one, the Azure Arc Virtual Machines. So this is the one that they just talked about, the provisioning of virtual machines in Azure for your on-prem. So this image was something that I created here in Azure, but basically this virtual machine, but where it's going to be placed will be in on-prem. So this Arc from image is this running VM was created from here, and so I can manage it just like a regular VM in terms of access control, network disk, and all this. I can turn it off, and if I want to, and then basically it will just have that sent from Azure to the on-premises. So the power of this is the AVD part, where basically if you say, hey, I want to spin up some session hosts for, with this configuration, with this image, like say HR image versus finance image, you can do all this in Azure in however, where all the multiple ways you can do it, from command line to, JSON or all those stuff that you can basically tell it to manage it that way. So that is the power of this. And basically the key thing with this is that you have the ability to set that up in your admin center. Under here, basically it's first thing what you do is set up the resource bridge, and then you basically set up the network, the disk, and the images and all that kind of stuff. But basically the idea is that you set up this resource bridge, and what it really is in the resource bridge is this this agent that runs in the cluster, and then this Kubernetes VM. So you see this is a Kubernetes kubelet server, and so all this is basically what's running behind it, so that you can do the imaging, you can send the commands and all that kind of stuff all to the on-prem. So you can kind of get a picture of that. So any questions before I jump into?
This is preview, right? But this is coming, right?
Yeah. So yeah, because it's going to be a very important feature, as I said, for AVD, but you can use it. It's just not tied to AVD. It's
Is it tied to the 22H2 release, or this is going to separate this enabler? The actual virtual.
No, it's not tied to, because right now I'm just on 21H2 right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
So that's the Azure Arc virtual machine. So you can kind of imagine what the power you can have for this feature. So Azure Stack HCI, for the folks that have Azure Stack, has probably seen this before. The moment you register with 21H2, basically you automatically are registering for Azure Arc as well. And within this, then you have your cluster view, and then you have your node view, right? And the power of Azure Arc itself is that you have the Arc connection, sort of build that pipe between it on-prem and Azure, but the power of it is that you can leverage extensions. And so the extensions is where you can add more features while still using that same pipe. So basically it's just a way to add things. And now I'll show you ones that have a lot of options there. So within this, you see the same image that that virtual machine that I had in the virtual networks, have one network, the disk, have created a data disk, and then this would be the image. I have like a Windows 2022 image. I just basically set it up, sys prepped it, and then that and then pushed it up as the image. And basically that's basically it there. So going back to the overview, so you see the two nodes. Each node basically you can set up the monitoring to get the health and the drives and all that kind of information. And the capabilities are those type of extensions that you can kind of get more out of it. The other thing is that with Azure Arc, when you run VMs on top of Azure Stack HCI, you can leverage the Azure benefits. Azure benefits gives you that the ability to get free the automation, the updates, and config and all that kind of stuff is part of the Azure benefits when you have VMs running in Azure Stack HCI. So it sort of looks like. Let me just go back to.
So I have a question for the group. I'm going to spend $20 of
Awesome.
of Howard's money. Does anyone know why that works on Azure Stack HCI and nothing? And if I run, so the question is, if I run the Windows VM on Azure Stack HCI, why does it inherit Azure services? For example, the hot patching and the updates and all that kind of stuff. Does anyone know why? You can either post it in the chat or you can yell out the answer.
I bet you Ernie does.
Let's see if anyone wants $20.
Well, you didn't say if you had to have the right answer.
Yep. Nope. Just an answer.
I would assume it's because you're registered with Azure. And so what you have pushed out through there is going to register and it becomes available to your stack.
Don't have the right answer yet. It is attestation, but so I'll let you in on what it actually does. What it actually does, so everyone on here probably knows that Azure Stack HCI has to talk to Azure once a month, right? And everyone goes, well, that's because you need to bill me, so you need to know how much I used. That's only one of the reasons. The other reason is that the certificate that you get, right, is an Azure certificate, and it's valid for 30 days. And so you can get those services running on your VM for 30 days. So when the VM looks at the infrastructure it's on, it doesn't know that it's not in Azure public cloud. It just assumes it is because it's the exact same certificate. And so that's one of the reasons that for the connection that kind of goes back and forth when it does the attestation.
So I cannot run Azure VM on a VMware vSAN?
So on a VMware vSAN, you will not inherit hot patching and all the updates and all the other things that you would typically get. So for example, if you ran the older versions of Windows, like 2008, 2012, or SQL 2008, SQL 2012, those security patches are done. You cannot buy them, right? You cannot pay us enough money to give us those security patches. We will not sell them to you. However, if you put it in either Azure or Azure Stack HCI, you will then inherit continued security updates for another year to give you time to move. And so, but the only reason is it thinks it's in Azure. That's why it works on-prem.
Thanks, Tim. $20 coming. Go ahead, Henry.
Okay. All right.
This
So
is good. Okay.
this is the Azure Stack HCI view. And I'll skip over Kubernetes for now. And so servers, you basically have your VMs, and as well as your the hosts themselves for each of the nodes in the cluster. So let's see here. So this is where you get some of the other things that Alan mentioned, like security, and that it will give you an analysis of the state of the security of your VM, the extensions, and this is where you get a few more options in terms of extensions that you can basically leverage for the VM. Policy, so this is one of the big ones. It's kind of, you know, the Azure way of group policy, and that you declare certain things should be this way, and then you can then say either you know, make it this way, or just alert you that this VM is not, you know, set up the way it should be. So you can see like, hey, my VM is not compliant based on certain rules that's been defined. And then you have the things like update management, inventory, change tracking, and then insights for monitoring and a task and all that kind of stuff. So this is the view that you have with the server on the Azure Arc. SQL Server, this one I've actually set up, but I think I'm still challenged in terms of some of the configurations. So this is, but basically the idea is, you know, you beyond just the VM for Azure Arc, that you can take advantage of additional things that especially SQL assessments to analyze that SQL instance that you have in that VM to see where you are in terms of security or some of the configurations and all that kind of stuff. So you can take advantage of some of the, you know, the things that they might suggest to you. And they also add scores in terms of how important it is, so that you can kind of gauge as to whether or not it's, you know, something that you really need to think about, or something that's, you know, low on the list, type of stuff. But
sorry, I was just going to add just a comment on SQL because we're talking about it. Just for the group, running SQL Server on Azure Stack HCI is the second fastest way you can run SQL Server. Right, the only way of getting it to go faster is on bare metal. Right, and so if you're the NASDAQ, you would do that. Most other people can get away with the performance of Azure Stack HCI and SQL. So that's kind of a big thing, is that we actually worked very, very, very closely with the SQL team to optimize the full stack to work, you know, well with SQL. Much like a lot of the other apps we're doing, but SQL was one that we called out early into this. Sorry, Henry.
No, good. Yeah, that's good perspective. So that's SQL, and the one for Kubernetes cluster is very interesting, because it itself is for Arc, but then the power comes in when you have your Kubernetes cluster, that you take advantage of things that are in this bucket now. That with your cluster, Kubernetes cluster, then you can take advantage of these other services. So in here, I have basically an app cluster and a data cluster. The data cluster, it has the SQL managed instance, and basically but before going there, just in the Kubernetes cluster, the idea is that you basically can manage this cluster with give me 1 second. Let's see. And basically you have your namespaces, your workloads, all that stuff is in here. And within that, you can modify the YAML and then save it and then kick it off. And then so you can make changes to your cluster as you see fit. With this cluster, this is where the extension comes in, that you have extensions for other things like API management, application services, Arc data controller, and this is the one for the SQL managed instances, and Key Vault and the event grid and stuff like that. So you can see that this basically you can kind of see that this, once you have a Arc enabled cluster, Kubernetes cluster, then it opens the door for a lot of other things. And within that, you have the open service mesh and the GitOps so that you can, deploy your cluster and run your cluster in a CI/CD type of mode, rather than, going there and modifying the configurations here to change from, 2 instances of this to 3 or something like that. Same thing, you can still leverage policies and you got the insights and metrics and logs and alerts and all that kind of stuff. So within this, then get into the world of what I have done is a SQL managed instance. So I have 2 instances within this one cluster. One instance basically is a single general purpose, and the other one is a business critical. So basically you have 2 choices, and with the business critical, you can have like 2 replicas or 3 replicas. And really it's, they try to make it, very simple in terms of how you want to set it up, and, in terms of how much memory, CPU and all that kind of stuff. And then within that, this is where the managed instance kind of comes in, and that the idea is that it's an evergreen setup. And then basically you're always up to date with your SQL. And I don't know why it's taking so long to load, but so within that, so this is the Azure Data Studio. So this is another view into the, just like your SQL Management Studio that, your DBAs would have. Basically, you can see that I have my one Arc control cluster with 2 instances. And within that, you can see that I have, once I set it up, it automatically creates a Grafana dashboard. And so what it would look like is this is my SQL managed instance. The moment I set it up, it set this up. It basically built the dashboard, shows you, your transactions, your batches, weight statistics, all that kind of stuff that DBAs want to know. But also what it does is it also has the host metrics of the host itself, and some of the data points from all the different things that are in this. So this is within the Kubernetes cluster view that you have all this information. And so basically you can compute backup, and then you can see the backups and then configure retention policy. So you can see some of the stuff that they put in as part of this the managed instances. So you can see like available upgrades, and then you basically it would show you the updates that are available, and then basically it's basically expect you to pretty much keep updating as it goes. And it's not like something that you basically lock in and stay with that version forever kind of thing. So
Ernie,
that's
Ernie had a question. Ernie,
There's a comment.
if you could make a comment, for your comment, you get a tequila Patron for those. Given that you're a loyal customer, and also MVP, you're very critical of everything. Okay, what's your comment? So everybody can hear it. I love pretty Ernie on the spot. Ernie, are you there?
oh, maybe he stepped away.
His comment is that he's on mute.
No,
There he is.
I literally just
Go ahead,
moved to
Andy.
another room and it dropped off the Wi-Fi. So repeat it again.
Okay. Can you make, given that you're a long-time Microsoft person, MVP, I love your critical comments. What's your comment? And you get,
I
I
need more. I literally lost 30 seconds of the whole meeting. Just repeat it again.
The question is, you made a comment in chat. I'd like you to broadcast that comment to everybody. And for that comment, you get a tequila Patron versus $20.
Oh, wow. All right. So I'll keep it short and sweet. We've been using AKS for HCI on-prem Kubernetes internally since before it went GA. We're running a couple production workloads on it. There was a learning curve and still is a learning curve for some of our developers who are very experienced .NET developers to manage Kubernetes. So being able to onboard the control plane aspect of it, a single pane of glass, if you will, into Azure, it makes their life a lot easier. Instead of having to fuddle through kubectl commands, it was a pretty cool thing to hand off to them.
So it's a compliment, but it's a compliment coupled with the fact it's not easy.
Kubernetes.
What's that?
Kubernetes.
You're making it say it's good, but it's not as easy as there's a learning curve, right? If you want to do it.
Well, there's a learning curve with Kubernetes in general. That's not Microsoft's fault. I mean, it is, you know, AKS is fine. It's just Kubernetes may be something that folks don't want to deal with once it's deployed, or they don't want to get into the Kubernetes management tools, and Arc does make that easier. I think there, yeah, maybe I conveyed it wrong in the text, but no, it's nothing but a compliment for Arc.
Yeah. So I'll add something to Ernie's thing. That we pick up a lot of business from xPivotal, which is Tanzu, and OpenShift, because basically people throw up their hands and say 200. And then they'll try this and go, okay, well, this solved a big part of my problem of just getting it running, right? And so that seems to be a real technical challenge for a lot of companies, is that, okay, we want to get into this, and they go with sort of the named players, and it's way more difficult than it's kind of, they're sold on until they try this and go, then they can see the difference. And so that we do pick up a lot of business from that.
Got it. I know. They spends a lot of time too. Go ahead. All right.
Yeah, so some of the things that are happening in the background. So basically, that just to level set is that in here I actually have 3 different Kubernetes clusters in this one node cluster. But the big thing is that just the moment you build this Kubernetes infrastructure with AKS and HCI, the thing that it does is basically builds up these 2 particular items. And this is, you can see if I connect to it. This is the control plane for Kubernetes, and basically it's one of the Mariner OSs. And then it has this the agent here. So this is what you get sort of off the bat. And then what it also does, it builds a load balancer for each of your clusters. And then after all that, then basically you build your actual cluster, like you have your you have your control plane itself, the load balancer, and then the workers themselves. So all the stuff that basically, these are just Kubernetes with AKS HCI. It's just a whole bunch of VMs doing different things to make this all work together. And so one way that I found kind of helpful was to leverage this free tool called Lens, and basically it gives me a view into the cluster that it's sort of, you know, just imagine like Windows Admin Center or whatever it is, you know, that into your cluster. So that gives you you can see the nodes that are in the cluster, CPU, memory, disk, and all that kind of stuff. What's the role? The workloads behind it, so you can look at the pods that are inside. Select the namespaces. You can see all the stuff that's happening with all these pods that are doing various jobs. But then you can isolate it, say, hey, I want to just look at SQL. So this is my multiple SQL instances that are sitting in this namespace, which is basically the view of the custom location in Azure Arc. So basically you see these SQL instances that are actually in here. So this is my way of orienting myself to understand Kubernetes, because you like Ernie said, in terms of just running kubectl commands, it's very hard to kind of see all the stuff that's involved in the Kubernetes. But this way you can actually kind of gauge, kind of understand what's happening, and you can kind of see like, hey, there's a pod, and within this pod, you'll see that there are multiple containers, and you can actually, for certain operations, you can actually go and go right into, right inside of that pod in that container. So there's a lot of stuff that you can kind of get if you're basically learning Kubernetes. So it's all the stuff like, hey, who is controlling this pod? Oh, it's this log SUI. So basically you click on that and you can kind of go drill down. And then you also have a better understanding by looking at labels and stuff like that. So as much as Azure Arc kind of tries to give you that view into this, sorry, let's see here, into like this namespaces, workloads, and that kind of stuff, that basically I found it very useful to see it in a different view. So
Thanks, Henry.
yeah, so this basically the key is that, okay, so you have your cluster, you can certainly do the SQL instance, manage instances, but then, you know, for your devs, really the power comes in when you start putting this application services on top of your Kubernetes cluster, because then they get to leverage that same tool that they have in Azure and put that into your existing on-prem Kubernetes cluster and leverage it that way, and then you know, they can do all that kind of stuff. So basically, this is the view of Azure Arc from various angles.
Thanks, Henry. This is really good. So as you can see, you know, this is different from what we've been talking about for the last 10 years, right? We're talking about services, talking about management, talking about true hybrid, because you're seeing a physical infrastructure that's hybrid sitting in your data center, but now you're taking advantage of all the services application that you can push down and manage it essentially like a hybrid platform. This is what I feel is so different from the way I've been seeing this world 2 years prior to this, right?
We're truly cloudifying hardware.
Exactly.
And then at the same time, we're saying, much like we do in our Azure side, is that tell us what you're doing so we can make decisions on it.
Yeah.
Not just push down a service and then we're done. So it's like we're truly sort of encompassing that edge and making it part of Azure. It's the best way of thinking about all of this internally is it's described as an Azure extension.
Yeah.
Right. That's what it is. We're just taking Azure and we're pushing it out further out.
But it comes to the top of an hour. Any questions from the audience? Sorry, we started a little late today with some glitches.
Yeah, one of the guys in our group that's also watching this was wondering if there's a plan to make auto-tune available through HCI. You can minimize the internet activity for deploying new devices.
Yeah, I realize AutoTune right now is only really supporting, say, like Windows 10, Windows 11, but we're a managed service provider, and we actually leverage WDS to put out a consistent version of server operating system with the way we want to configure it. And then we also do that for client workstations. But just to minimize that internet traffic, say in a rural community where they only have 100 meg internet, if we're selling, we'll say 600 new student workstations, that's a heck of a lot of internet activity in order for AutoTune to actually be able to do, or not tune, sorry, Autopilot to be able to do that.
The comment I would make is that as a general rule, the goal is feature parity, right? So that's the general statement. As to when an individual service is going to be available or not available, I can't comment on that unless I go and have a look and see if I can talk about it. But so the one thing I can tell you is that this is not the first time I've heard this comment, because I have other situations that, once again, this is not specifically related to Autopilot in general, but to give you another example, you saw the space example I gave, and also the cruise ships, and there's a lot of military applications whereby I've only got X amount of bandwidth, and I need X, whatever X is, running at the edge, given the similar sort of parameters that you've given, right? I don't have a lot of bandwidth. I can't be moving stuff back and forth. I need to do it once, things like that. And so I would just say watch this space for now. But I do know that your question has been heard internally. I don't know if that helps, but that's it.
Thanks, sir. Any other questions before we wrap?
Yeah, I have a question around the AKS and the VM self-service. My first question is, can you run those two services in the same Azure Stack HCI cluster?
So I was reading that. What was the question? Can you run which?
Yeah, so I think the VM the VM provisioning and the AKS on HCI, I believe they can run on both, but I think you have to start with AKS on HCI, then you can do the VM provisioning feature on top of that. That's what I remember. I don't know if Ernie, I don't know if he's got more recent information about that.
I'm pretty sure you need to go AKS first and then that. That's based on how mock and KVA works, which is the guts of both of those services.
And that it's somewhere I read that, like, if you decide to undo it, uninstall, basically it will uninstall everything.
Right. Yeah. Like if you had AKS and you had VM self, if you had like Resource Bridge on there, yeah, and you decide to rip out AKS, you're going to rip out everything because all the dependencies are there.
Gotcha. Okay. My second question, if you don't mind, is regarding the VM self-service specifically. So today we run Windows Azure Pack, which provides a self-service portal specifically for our developers to spin up their own virtual machines. We were hoping that the VM self-service could be a replacement for that, since Windows Azure Pack is going away over the next couple of years. Do you see that as a potential replacement? I have tested with VM self-service. Today, I would say it's lacking. But what is your thoughts with that in the future? Would that be a sufficient replacement for something like Windows Azure Pack? And again, just to allow our customers, which would be internal developers, to create their own machine.
So Azure Pack's basically gone, as we're all, that's not a surprise to anyone. There's some very large customers that right now are transitioning, specifically doing it to self-service portal, with the idea that, once again, going back and ensuring that they're not losing functionality in doing this, or they're gaining functionality that they couldn't do before in the new way of doing it. And so that's an active conversation. And I literally had someone email me this morning about the exact same thing. but that's the direction it's going.
So we don't know specifically, but that topic again is something that you have heard many times. And once become real, we can let Dave know, right? Dave is running multiple clusters as well. For energy.
Yeah.
So Dave, we'll take your question. I'll drill over to Alan and make sure we track it and see whether or not we get some clarity on that as well.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Yep, I'd actually, Howard, this is Brandon. I'd like to know as well. We run Azure Pack today for our customers on some stuff. And I've been asking Jeff Woolsey and Cosmos Darwin. I've been asking this question for a long time. We were so ready to get off Azure Pack, but just nothing that's feature parity today.
I have that conversation. You're not the only one. There's some very large. Let's just say this is some very large people with a lot of money who also are in the same boat, and they want answers too. So that normally drives. And that drives the question internally and the answer. So it is a well-known thing that we're working on how to best solve.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, and I think Brandon, I did relay the questions to the PM. I think it's something that you brought up last time when we talked in the. I don't remember what they were, but yeah, basically they know that they are aware of the ones that you brought up.
Yeah, I ask just about every opportunity I get, so.
Keep on asking, don't stop. It's for you.
Yeah. They need to know the demand, right?
Yeah, that's right. Okay, any other questions? I think this is a good, different conversation we ever had. And we'll continue to evolve as we learn and we share with you our thoughts, right? Because this is a conversation I haven't been used to, but I have to have these conversations and I'm learning as well. But hopefully you guys could understand the kind of direction and see how we could continue to take advantage of these opportunities. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you joining the call. I'm looking forward to talk to each one of you soon. And I'll see you at Ignite.
See you, Howard. Thanks, man.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Howard. Good to meet you, Alan.
Good
Good job, Henry.
Thanks, guys.